Okay, let's continue with foraging and searching behavior simulation. So here in this slide, it's about the refining of the very simple Simon foraging model we discussed in the last video. So it was a very similar fundamental model to simulate foraging behavior, but in the reality, animals' behavior may be more complex than that fundamental model because animals usually, when we're talking about foraging, it's animals, right? Or when we're searching something, humans are searching something, we all have memories, right? So we can use more complex strategies. So we want to refine the very fundamental Simon foraging model. For example, we can use self-avoiding walk. I mentioned this in the last video, right? Avoid locations visited and found to have no resources. Okay, or we can use some strategy called reinforced walk. Revisit locations found to have resources. Of course, this strategy is based on the regrowth of resources, which means that you collected resources from a location, and that resource, the food will regrow after a specific time or a season or a month, right? And if that's the case, you can revisit where you have visited before to check if they are respawn resources. And um, animals or human beings, we could also have something called mental maps. They are maps in your brain, in your mind. So you can remember locations. You can remember locations you have visited, right? And if it's an animal that more evoluted, right? They could have more complex mental maps, may include routes and time, how you visited a specific location, when you visited it, okay? And time is important. One is especially important when you assume that resources will respawn, will regrow, right? After a specific time, you may want to go back to a location you visited before to check if resources are back, so you can collect them again. And the distribution of resources is also important in foraging and searching behavior. And the two major drivers that influence foraging and searching patterns. Of course, the searching strategy is important, and also the environment is also important. And sometimes it's difficult to disentangle the effects of these two drivers. It means that searching strategy is important. The distribution of resources in the surrounding environment is also important. But which one is more critical for a walker, for a forager? It's very difficult to separate the importance of these two factors, of these two drivers. Okay. So on the left side, we have a space, we have a circle space in that. And we can say that each circle, each small dot here can be considered as a tree or a location where resources could be found. And the blue trajectory here is a searching for resources. Because you can see that these trees, these locations, they're generally, we can say, evenly distributed across the space. There is no obvious clusters of these resources, of these locations with resources. So you can say the trajectory is relatively random. On the right side, we have this. We have the same space, the space with the same size, but within this space, resources, they are not evenly distributed, Okay, these trees, they formed a lot of small clusters. So in this environment, when you are trying to decide search strategy, you should consider that there is space between clusters that doesn't have nothing, doesn't have anything. It means that you should avoid staying in this empty space, So obviously the trajectory here is different from the former one. Okay, the best strategy is go to a specific place. If you find food, if you find resources there, it means that there should be other locations with resources nearby because this these locations with resources, they are clustering within the space. You should stay at a place, collect all the resources, and make a long trip to another cluster and collect all the resources, and then go to another one. This is actually levy flight, right? We mentioned before. So a lot of small moves and several big leaps. Okay. So in the next two models I'm going to introduce, they will demonstrate that the distribution of resources alone can create complex search patterns. Okay, no need to say if you also combine different searching strategies into your simulation, that, I mean, the model will be even more complex. So foraging monkeys model, okay, 4.5, you can find it in our textbook model library. Okay, so there are fruit-bearing trees distributed according to, say, CSR, or homogeneous Poisson-Pond distribution. What is a CSR? A CSR distribution is a distribution that does not have the first order structure and does not have the second order structure. Okay, and each tree's resources drawn from a random distribution, exponential or log normal. It means that the amount of resources on each tree is different. Some trees, they are full of bananas. Some trees, they only have one or two bananas on it. Okay, how to decide the amount of resources on each tree? We draw the value for resources from exponential distribution or log normal distribution. Okay, and the individual moves, or you can say monkey, moves to tree with the highest resource to distance ratio. So the resource on a specific tree is Zj. That tree is J, right? And the distance between current location I and tree J is Dij. So the larger this ratio is, the better that tree is, because we want to maximize resources on that tree and minimize the distance between the current location and the tree which have bananas, right? So there are different trees with different numbers of bananas on them. Some of them they're closer, some of them they're further away. So how to decide which tree to go? We calculate the ratio between resource to distance. Okay, and for this model in NetLogo, Forager knows locations of resources, which means that within search radius is 10. Okay, within the search radius, after each step, you will always say new locations, right? Once you found these locations, we make sure that the forager knows which of these locations have resources and the exact amount of resources at different locations. So this ratio can be calculated. If you don't know where resources are within the radius and you don't know the amount of bananas on each tree, then you cannot calculate this ratio, right? Then you cannot decide where to go. So forager knows locations of resources within radius, and the radius is 10. Okay, so here is the result for the simulation. On the left side, we have the spatial pattern of trees and the monkey. So we have a lot of small gray circles here, each one with a specific size, and that size is proportional to the amount of bananas or resources on each tree, and each circle is a tree. And we also have this black trajectory. That is the trajectory of the monkey, of the forager, and it starts from this black circle, black tree. Okay, and during this searching process, it is following the strategy of the ratio, okay, of the ratio. Maximize the yield per distance moved, the ratio between Z and D. So on the right side, we have this panel showing you the percentile distribution from 0.5 percentile to 100 percentile in terms of tree yield on the left side and step length on the right side. And for this specific simulation, the resources, the amount of resources on each tree is drawn from an exponential distribution. And on this panel, we have two curves. The solid one is for tree yield. The dashed line, curve is for step length. Okay, now let's focus on the step length here. So the longest step took place in this simulation was steps with 8 units, 8 distance units. So the longest step length is 8. Okay, and it accounts for very small percentage of all steps. It's 0.5 percentile, which means that during this simulation, only 0.5% of steps, of all steps, have a step length of 8, which means that there are long steps. But these steps, they are very rare, okay, due to this spatial distribution of resources. And you see that movement patterns are surprisingly stable for a given resource distribution. It means that if we redistribute resources within this space, but still use exponential distribution, you will have a similar curve here for step length. Okay, which means there won't be so many long steps. Okay, but if we change the resource distribution, for example, on the right side, everything stays the same as the left side, but the simulation changed a little bit in terms of the distribution of resources on each tree. Here, we use something called log normal distribution to decide the amount of resources on each tree. So here, similarly, we have another panel, and on the left side is tree yield. You can see that the distribution of tree yield now varies in a larger range from 0 to 200. And I didn't show you the difference between exponential and log normal distribution. You can find it anywhere. You can find it anywhere on the internet. You will see the difference, but the importance is not the difference between the shape of exponential distribution and log distribution here. The importance is the distribution of step length. Okay. Similarly, we find out the step length of 8 right here, but this time there are even larger steps here. The largest value for step length is above 10. Okay, focus on this dashed line, dashed curve. So here is 10. Here is 10. There are some steps with a length of 10, and there are even more steps. There are not even more. There are other steps that have step length longer than 10. But let's focus on 8 because 8 used to be the maximum step length on the left, right? Here, 8 is not the maximum length anymore. And even beyond that, what's the percentile for step length of 8? It's more than 2%. On the left side, it was only 0.5%. And here, of course, this percentile is accumulative. So let's just say this is 2.3 percentile, which means that in this simulation, more than 2.3% of steps are longer than 8 units, 8 distance units. So what does it mean? It means that when you change the distribution of resources in the environment, on the left side, exponential distribution, on the right side, log normal distribution, there are even what? Longer steps needed to find resources. Okay, which means the change of spatial distribution of resources matters here, and it affects foragers' behavior. And here we didn't even discuss the strategies for this forager, and the environment itself can change the searching behavior here specifically in terms of step length of a forager. Okay, so it's very difficult to disentangle empirically the effects of resource distribution, log normal distribution, exponential distribution, or other distribution versus search strategy. Okay, which means that here we didn't change the search strategy of the forager, and we only changed the spatial distribution of resources. And this is a change. You can expect that if we simultaneously change the strategy of the forager, searching strategy of the forager, it will be pretty difficult to tell. And the change in between the panels, if these changes, they were led by the change of searching strategy or by the change of spatial distribution of resources. Okay. I will stop here. In the next video, in the next section 4.4, I'm going to start with simple model of foraging with rate growth. Okay. Thank you very much.